The icy chill of December seeped through Anya Lorimer's well-worn coat as she stood outside the imposing iron gates of the Merrow estate. She clutched a thin folder, her resume tucked neatly inside, and took a deep breath to steady herself. The stakes were high. This job could mean a chance to lighten the load on her family, at least for a little while. Her widowed mother worked tirelessly, and Anya's siblings relied on her for school supplies and holiday cheer that had been hard to come by in recent years. Pushing the intercom button, Anya announced her arrival. The gate creaked open, revealing a long, tree-lined driveway that led to a grand mansion bathed in golden light. Her steps quickened as she crossed the threshold into a world she never thought she'd find herself in. Anya sat on a velvet-upholstered chair in the cavernous front hall, trying to ignore the knot tightening in her stomach. The estate's holiday decor was already in place, twinkling lights wrapped around banisters, wreaths adorned with crimson ribbons, and a towering Christmas tree shimmering with gold ornaments. It was a world apart from the modest decorations back home. "Miss Lorimer," a sharp voice interrupted her thoughts. A stern-looking butler gestured toward a set of double doors. "Mr. Merrow will see you now." Gathering her courage, Anya stepped into a sprawling office. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the snow-dusted grounds outside, and the walls were lined with bookshelves that looked more for show than use. Behind a sleek mahogany desk sat Gideon Merrow, his piercing gaze making her feel like a subject under a microscope. Gideon, a man in his early 40s, was immaculately dressed in a tailored suit that screamed wealth and authority. He barely glanced up from the papers on his desk as he motioned for Anya to sit. "Your resume says you have experience in event planning," Gideon said, his tone clipped. "Why apply for a position that's essentially seasonal housework?" Anya straightened in her chair, willing her voice to remain steady. "Because I believe the skills I've developed, managing tight budgets, coordinating schedules, and adapting under pressure, can bring value to this role. And I'm willing to work hard to prove that." Gideon's lips curved into something resembling a smirk. "We'll see," he said. "My expectations are high, Miss Lorimer. Mistakes aren't just frowned upon, they're unacceptable." As Anya prepared to respond, her eyes wandered to a photograph perched on a nearby side table. It was a striking image, her late father, Everett Lorimer, shaking hands with a younger Gideon Merrow. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. "Is something wrong?" Gideon asked, his sharp tone cutting through Anya's trance. Anya blinked, then pointed to the photo. "That's my father. Everett Lorimer." Gideon's expression shifted, the guarded confidence faltering for just a moment. He glanced at the photograph and then back at Anya. "Everett Lorimer was your father?" His voice softened slightly, though his demeanor remained distant. "Yes," Anya said, her emotions bubbling beneath the surface. "He passed away a few years ago. But before that, before everything changed, he was a wonderful man. A brilliant engineer. And apparently, someone you knew well enough to keep his picture in your office." Gideon leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. "Everett was more than an acquaintance. He was my mentor, one of the few people who believed in me when I was starting out. We worked together on some of my first projects." "Then why did our families lose touch?" Anya asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "He always spoke highly of you, but as far as I know, you disappeared from our lives." Gideon's mouth tightened into a thin line, and he stood abruptly, turning to face the window. "It's complicated," he said after a long pause. "There were business decisions, things I had to prioritize. But that doesn't mean I stopped valuing what your father taught me." Anya swallowed hard, her chest heavy with questions she didn't have the courage to voice. She could sense there was more to the story, but Gideon's closed-off demeanor left no room for further probing. "Miss Lorimer," Gideon said, turning back to face her, "the past is the past. But I respect your father's memory, and I see potential in you. The holiday season is critical for me, and I need someone reliable to assist with the Christmas gala and other preparations. The job is yours if you're interested." Anya hesitated, her mind racing. She could still feel the weight of her family's financial struggles, the pressure to bring some semblance of joy to her siblings this holiday season. And yet, the tension of being under Gideon's scrutiny felt almost unbearable. "I'll take it," she said finally, her voice firm. "But I want to make one thing clear. I'm not just here for the paycheck. I want answers about my father, and I won't stop until I get them." Gideon raised an eyebrow, his lips quirking into a faint, almost amused smile. "Fair enough," he said. "But don't let your curiosity distract you from the work at hand. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting to attend. Thorne will show you out." As the butler led Anya back to the front door, she couldn't help but steal one last glance at the photograph. Her father's face looked so full of hope and purpose, a stark contrast to the struggles he faced later in life. She promised herself then and there that she would uncover the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. Stepping back into the cold December air, Anya felt a mix of determination and unease. She had landed the job, but it was clear that working for Gideon Merrow would be no ordinary challenge. Still, if it meant helping her family and finding the missing pieces of her father's story, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The morning after Anya accepted the job at the Merrow estate, she walked up the grand driveway once again, a mix of determination and trepidation in her step. The sky was overcast, and the brisk wind carried a promise of snow. She adjusted her scarf, reminding herself why she was doing this, for her family and for answers about her father. The grandeur of the mansion still made her stomach flip, but this time, she was resolved not to let it intimidate her. Gideon Merrow greeted her with the same sharp, businesslike demeanor she'd encountered during the interview. He wasted no time laying out her responsibilities. She was to help manage the annual Christmas gala, oversee the decorations, coordinate caterers, and handle any unexpected problems. His instructions came rapid fire, as though he assumed she was already an expert on his preferences. Anya scribbled notes furiously, not daring to interrupt. By the end of their meeting, her notebook was filled with a checklist so daunting it made her head spin. Gideon snapped his fingers to get her attention as she lingered in thought. "This gala needs to be flawless. If you think you can't handle that, speak up now." Anya met his gaze without flinching. "I can handle it," she said firmly. Gideon gave her a curt nod and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the ornate hallway. The first few days were grueling. Anya quickly realized Gideon's perfectionism bordered on obsession. Every suggestion she made was either dismissed or met with thinly veiled disdain. When she proposed incorporating more local artisans into the gala's decor, a nod to the town's vibrant crafting community, Gideon shot her down. "This isn't a flea market," he said, barely looking up from his tablet. Tasks that seemed straightforward turned into Herculean efforts under Gideon's scrutiny. Setting up the dining room for a catering trial became a lesson in futility as he nitpicked everything from the alignment of the silverware to the temperature of the mock dishes. "Do it again," he'd say, waving a hand as though her work was an affront to his vision. Anya bit her tongue, channeling her frustration into getting the job done. As exhausting as Gideon's demands were, she reminded herself why she was there. Each paycheck would go toward her siblings' holiday gifts and helping her mother catch up on bills. And perhaps, amidst the whirlwind of tasks, she might uncover more about the connection between her father and Gideon. Not all of her time at the estate was unpleasant. Occasionally, Anya caught glimpses of a different Gideon, a man who wasn't all sharp edges and clipped words. One afternoon, as she rearranged ornaments on the Christmas tree, she overheard him talking to his wife, Sabine, in the next room. "They're the same ornaments we used when I was a kid," Gideon said, his tone uncharacteristically warm. "My mother used to insist on decorating the tree herself. We had this tradition where she'd tell us the story behind each ornament as she hung it." Sabine laughed softly. "And let me guess, You've memorized all those stories by now. Of course, Gideon replied, a faint chuckle in his voice. Anya smiled to herself as she placed a sparkling star near the top of the tree. For a brief moment, Gideon sounded like a man who cared deeply about the spirit of Christmas, even if he rarely showed it. But such moments were fleeting. More often than not, Gideon reverted to his brusque, demanding self. When Anya suggested rearranging the seating chart to accommodate last-minute RSVPs, he dismissed her idea outright. The seating arrangement is final. If someone's unhappy, they can deal with it, he said, walking past her as though the conversation was over. Despite the challenges, Anya refused to back down. She began arriving early and staying late, poring over Gideon's old files whenever she had a spare moment. She searched for anything that might shed light on her father's relationship with Gideon. Late one evening, she found herself in Gideon's study, sorting through a stack of dusty ledgers. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the fire crackling in the hearth. Her fingers brushed against a folder tucked at the back of a drawer. Inside were contracts and letters bearing her father's name, along with Gideon's. One letter, in particular, caught her eye. It was dated years ago and referenced a project that had been pivotal for Gideon's career. As Anya skimmed the text, her heart sank. The terms of the agreement were heavily skewed in Gideon's favor. While it wasn't outright unethical, it was clear her father had taken a significant risk to support Gideon's endeavors. The realization left a bitter taste in Anya's mouth. Her father had believed in Gideon, had invested his time and expertise into helping him succeed. Yet Gideon's success seemed to have come at a cost her family might still be paying. Anya slid the folder back into the drawer just as Gideon entered the study. His eyes narrowed at the sight of her standing near his desk. "Do you make a habit of snooping, Miss Lorimer?" he asked, his voice cold. Anya met his gaze, her jaw tightening. "I was organizing the files, as you asked. If that counts as snooping, then I suppose I'm guilty." Gideon studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Just don't waste time on irrelevant documents. The gala is in less than 2 weeks, and there's still plenty of work to be done." As he left the room, Anya exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. Gideon's words had been dismissive, but there was a flicker of something in his expression, an unease he couldn't quite mask. Anya couldn't tell if it was guilt or something else entirely. The days leading up to the gala passed in a blur of activity. Anya worked tirelessly, coordinating with vendors, overseeing deliveries, and ensuring every detail was perfect. Gideon continued to hover, quick to criticize but slow to offer praise. One afternoon, as Anya arranged poinsettias along the grand staircase, Sabine approached her. Unlike her husband, Sabine exuded warmth and charm. She placed a hand on Anya's arm, stopping her mid-task. "You've been doing a wonderful job," Sabine said with a smile. "I know Gideon isn't the easiest person to work for, but trust me, he recognizes your effort. He just has a terrible way of showing it." Anya managed a small smile. "Thank you. That means a lot." Sabine tilted her head, studying Anya for a moment. "You remind me of someone," she said softly. "Your father, I think. He was always so dedicated, so determined to see things through." The mention of her father sent a pang through Anya's chest. She nodded, unsure of how to respond. Sabine gave her arm a reassuring squeeze before walking away, leaving Anya alone with her thoughts. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Gideon's study as Anya sorted through a stack of papers on his desk. The room was quiet except for the faint crackle of the fireplace, but Anya's mind was anything but at ease. The past few days had been a whirlwind of preparations for the gala, yet no matter how busy she kept herself, her thoughts kept drifting back to her father and the unanswered questions that gnawed at her. The drawer she had peeked into before called to her again. Gideon had mentioned nothing about its contents, but Anya couldn't shake the feeling that it held more clues about her father's connection to him. Steeling herself, she opened it again. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the folders, careful not to disturb the carefully arranged files. There, sandwiched between architectural blueprints and financial reports, was a letter bearing her father's name. Anya pulled it out and scanned the contents, her eyes widening as the details came into focus. The letter outlined a business agreement between Everett Lorimer and Gideon Merrow, an early partnership meant to kickstart Gideon's career. At first, it seemed harmless, but as Anya read further, the terms became unsettlingly clear. Her father had invested significant resources into Gideon's projects, trusting that they would both benefit. Yet Gideon's name alone was listed as the sole benefactor for future profits, leaving Everett with only a fraction of what he had contributed. As Anya sifted through more documents, a clearer picture emerged. Gideon's financial success had come at a cost, her father's cost. It wasn't outright theft, but it was undeniably opportunistic. And worse, the timing of the partnership's collapse aligned suspiciously with the period when her family began struggling. Anya felt a surge of anger rise in her chest. How could Gideon, someone her father had clearly trusted, exploit him like this? She clutched the papers tightly, her mind racing. Gideon entered the room, his footsteps soft on the carpet. "You're still here," he remarked, glancing at the clock. "I thought you'd have gone home by now." Anya turned to face him, her jaw set. "I found these," she said, holding up the documents. "Care to explain?" Gideon's expression shifted, his usual confidence faltering. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the papers in her hands. "What exactly are you accusing me of, Miss Lorimer?" he asked, his tone measured but wary. "I'm accusing you of taking advantage of my father," Anya said, her voice trembling with anger. "He trusted you, invested in you, and you let him shoulder the risk while you reaped the rewards. And when things went south, you walked away, leaving him with nothing. Do you have any idea what that did to my family?" Gideon's face hardened. "That's not how it happened," he said firmly. "Your father made his own decisions. He was aware of the risks, just as I was. But you came out on top, didn't you?" Anya shot back. "You got your success, your mansion, your perfect little life. And we were left to pick up the pieces." Gideon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't personal, Anya. It was business. Your father and I had different priorities, and we made choices based on what we thought was best at the time. I didn't set out to hurt him or your family." Anya's eyes burned with unshed tears. "That doesn't make it right," she said, her voice cracking. "You may not have meant to hurt us, but you did. And you never even looked back." Gideon opened his mouth to respond, but Anya held up a hand to stop him. "I'm done," she said. "I can't work for someone who treats people like disposable stepping stones." Without waiting for a reply, Anya grabbed her coat and stormed out of the study. Gideon called after her, but she didn't stop. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her back as she walked down the hallway, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and sadness. The snow had started falling by the time Anya reached the estate's gates. She paused for a moment, letting the cold air fill her lungs. Her hands were still shaking, and she clenched them into fists to steady herself. Quitting meant losing the income her family desperately needed, but staying would have felt like a betrayal, to her father, to herself. As she walked back to town, Anya replayed the confrontation in her mind. She wanted to feel satisfied, vindicated even, but all she felt was hollow. Back at the mansion, Gideon stood alone in his study, staring at the documents Anya had left on his desk. His mind churned with memories he'd long buried, of late nights working with Everett Lorimer, of the risks they'd taken together, of the choices he'd made to ensure his own success. Sabine entered the room, her arms crossed. "What's going on?" she asked, noticing the troubled look on his face. "Anya quit," Gideon said flatly. Sabine raised an eyebrow. "And why is that?" Gideon hesitated, then handed her the documents. As she read through them, her expression darkened. "Gideon," she said, her voice low. "This is bad." "It wasn't malicious," Gideon said defensively. "It was business." Sabine fixed him with a pointed look. "That excuse might work in the boardroom, but it doesn't hold up here. You took advantage of her father, whether you meant to or not. And now you've driven her away just when we need her the most." Gideon's jaw tightened. "I didn't drive her away. She made her choice." "No," Sabine said sharply. "You made the choice years ago when you put your ambition above everything else. And now it's coming back to haunt you. Without Anya, this gala is going to fall apart. And frankly, you deserve that." Gideon opened his mouth to argue, but Sabine cut him off. "Fix it," she said, her tone leaving no room for debate. "Not because of the gala, but because it's the right thing to do. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're not the man I thought you were." Gideon stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain, not about his business acumen or his ability to solve problems, but about the kind of person he'd become. As Sabine left the room, Gideon sank into his chair, his mind racing. The Christmas gala had always been his way of honoring the people who had shaped his life. Yet here he was, faced with the painful truth that he had failed to honor the man who had helped him most. Gideon Merrow sat at the edge of his leather armchair, his elbows resting on his knees as he stared into the dying embers of the fireplace. The normally pristine study felt suffocating, cluttered with papers and the weight of Anya Lorimer's accusations. He could still hear her words, sharp and unwavering, cutting through his defense. He had told himself for years that his choices had been necessary, that business had to come first. Yet now, the consequences of those choices seemed glaringly personal. The next morning, Gideon found himself standing outside the local community center, a place he had driven past countless times but never entered. The sign above the door was faded, the building modest but bustling with life. Children's laughter echoed from inside, mingling with the scent of baked goods wafting through the cold air. Gideon hesitated, his polished shoes crunching on the salted pavement. He had spent his career commanding boardrooms, negotiating deals, and delegating tasks. Yet now, the idea of walking through these doors to ask for forgiveness felt impossibly daunting. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The warmth of the building hit him immediately, along with the chaotic energy of a dozen children running around, their voices overlapping in excitement. Anya was at the far end of the room, her back turned as she helped a young boy untangle a string of Christmas lights. "Miss Lorimer," Gideon said, his voice cutting through the noise. Anya stiffened but didn't turn around. "You're a little far from your ivory tower, Mr. Merrow." Gideon ignored the jab and stepped closer. "I need to speak with you." Anya finally turned, her expression guarded. "I think you said enough last night." "I didn't say enough," Gideon admitted, his tone quieter now. "I should have listened to you." "I should have," he stopped, searching for the right words. "I'm sorry, Anya. For everything. For what happened to your father, for how I treated you. You were right. I let my ambition blind me to the consequences, and I've been too proud to admit it until now." Anya crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "That's a nice speech, but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change how my family struggled while you built your empire." Gideon took a step closer, his voice soft but earnest. "You have every right to be angry. And I can't undo the past. But I want to make things right, if you'll let me." Anya stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she shook her head. "You don't get to just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. If you're serious about making things right, you need to prove it. Words aren't enough, Gideon." Gideon nodded, his shoulders sagging slightly. "What do you want me to do?" Anya tilted her head, considering him for a moment. Then a small, sly smile tugged at the corner of her lips. You can start by volunteering here. Tomorrow night, we're hosting a Christmas dinner for the kids and their families. We're short on help, and I doubt you've ever served punch or washed dishes in your life. It'll be a good place for you to start learning what it means to give back. Gideon blinked, caught off guard by the request. You want me to volunteer? Yes, Anya said simply. If you're serious about changing, show me. Otherwise, this conversation is over. Gideon hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I'll be here, he said, his voice steady. Good, Anya replied, turning back to the string of lights. And don't be late. These kids don't care who you are, they just want someone who shows up. Gideon left the community center feeling uncharacteristically unsure of himself. He had expected Anya to be stubborn, but her challenge had been both surprising and humbling. As he drove back to the estate, he couldn't help but wonder if he was truly ready to step out of his comfort zone. Back at the community center, Anya watched him leave through the window, her expression thoughtful. She wasn't sure if Gideon could change, but for the first time, she saw a glimmer of possibility. Gideon Merrow arrived at the school's community hall the next evening, dressed in casual slacks and a sweater that looked far too pristine for the bustling atmosphere inside. The room buzzed with activity, children darted between tables, their laughter mingling with the chatter of parents and volunteers. A Christmas tree, adorned with mismatched ornaments made by tiny hands, stood proudly in the corner, its lights flickering warmly. Anya spotted Gideon immediately. His expression was somewhere between discomfort and disbelief as he took in the scene. She approached him with a clipboard in hand, her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. You're late, Anya said, arching a brow. Gideon checked his watch. I'm 2 minutes early. You're late, she repeated firmly, handing him an apron decorated with snowflakes. Put this on. You're on serving duty tonight. Gideon took the apron with a grimace. Isn't there something more suited to my skill set? Anya smirked. You'll be serving mashed potatoes, not closing a merger. I'm sure you'll manage. Gideon slipped on the apron, muttering something under his breath. Anya led him to the serving line, where a cheerful older woman handed him a ladle and gestured to a massive tray of mashed potatoes. Just scoop and smile, sweetheart, the woman said. The kids will eat it up, literally and figuratively. Gideon nodded stiffly and took his position behind the table. The line of children and parents moved quickly, and Gideon soon discovered that, just scooping and smiling, was harder than it looked. His first scoop slid off the plate, splattering onto the table. The child in front of him burst into giggles, pointing at the mess. Well, at least someone's enjoying themselves, Gideon muttered as he cleaned it up. By the time he served his 10th plate, his rhythm had improved slightly, though his confidence was still shaky. Anya passed by, her arms full of paper plates, and paused to observe him. You're doing fine, she said, her tone laced with teasing. Though you might want to loosen up. It's mashed potatoes, not gold bullion. Gideon glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. Thanks for the sage advice. Anya laughed and moved on, leaving Gideon to face his next challenge, a child with very specific requests. Can I have a smiley face on my potatoes? The little girl asked, her big eyes full of hope. Gideon blinked. A smiley face? The girl nodded eagerly. Awkwardly, Gideon used the back of the ladle to attempt a smiley face in the mound of potatoes. It ended up looking more like a lopsided blob, but the girl clapped her hands in delight. Perfect, she declared before skipping off. Gideon exhaled, shaking his head. This is harder than it looks. After the serving line wound down, Anya approached Gideon again, clipboard in hand. Time for your next task, she said, motioning toward a table covered in cookies and frosting. We need more cookies decorated for dessert. Gideon stared at the table, his confidence wavering. I'm not exactly an artist. You don't have to be, Anya said with a shrug. Just have fun with it. The kids won't judge your technique. Reluctantly, Gideon joined the table. He picked up a plain sugar cookie and a piping bag filled with green frosting. His first attempt at a Christmas tree design turned out more like a green blob, but the child next to him burst out laughing. That's supposed to be a tree? The boy asked, his tone incredulous. Gideon smirked. It's a very modern interpretation. The boy laughed harder. You're terrible at this. Gideon chuckled, setting the cookie down. You're not wrong. Anya passed by again, glancing at his creations. Wow, she said, pretending to shield her eyes. Are you trying to scare people away from dessert? Gideon shook his head but couldn't help the laugh that escaped him. I'd like to see you do better. Anya grabbed a piping bag and a cookie, deftly creating a simple but elegant snowflake design. She handed it to Gideon with a grin. Like that, she said. Gideon sighed dramatically. Show off. Gideon's transformation at the community dinner didn't happen all at once. At first, it was small things, a quick smile here, a genuine laugh there, but each moment chipped away at the polished armor he had worn for so long. It started during his chaotic attempt to lead the sing-along. The kids' unfiltered giggles at his exaggerated ha 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 and his awkward rhythm turned his embarrassment into something unexpectedly fun. By the end of the song, he found himself grinning in a way he hadn't in years. His next task involved serving punch to an enthusiastic crowd of children who seemed magnetically drawn to chaos. One particularly boisterous boy knocked over the ladle, spilling a bright red waterfall of juice onto Gideon's pristine shoes. The boy gasped, his face frozen in horror, but before he could bolt, Gideon crouched down. Well, I guess my shoes were thirsty, Gideon said, feigning seriousness. The boy blinked, then burst into laughter, prompting Gideon to chuckle along with him. A nearby volunteer handed Gideon a mop, and as he cleaned up, Anya watched from across the room. She wasn't sure which surprised her more, the fact that Gideon didn't snap at the kid or that he was laughing about it. Later in the evening, Gideon found himself tasked with leading a sing-along for the children. This, he quickly realized, was far outside his comfort zone. Armed with a microphone and a laminated sheet of lyrics, he stood in front of the crowd, his expression betraying his unease. All right, kids, Anya called out, her voice carrying across the room. Mr. Merrow is going to lead us in Jingle Bells. The children cheered, and Gideon shot Anya a withering look. She gave him a thumbs up, her grin widening. Taking a deep breath, Gideon began singing, his baritone voice stiff at first. The children joined in enthusiastically, their energy contagious. By the second verse, Gideon found himself relaxing, even adding a bit of humor by exaggerating the ha 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 in the chorus. The kids erupted into giggles, and by the end of the song, Gideon was laughing along with them. When the sing-along ended, one of the children tugged on Gideon's apron. You're kind of funny, the boy said, looking up at him. Gideon crouched down to meet the boy's eye level. Kinda funny? I thought I was hilarious. The boy giggled. Maybe a little hilarious. Gideon ruffled the boy's hair, a small smile tugging at his lips. As the evening wore on, Gideon moved from task to task, each one presenting its own comedic challenges. While helping hang additional decorations, he accidentally toppled a string of lights, which ended up tangled around him like a glowing lasso. The children erupted in cheers, calling him Christmas Cowboy, a nickname that seemed to stick for the rest of the night. When one of the younger kids got upset about a missing stocking, Gideon took it upon himself to find a replacement. He improvised with a red scarf and a touch of imagination, explaining to the boy that Santa sometimes left special delivery stockings for the most deserving kids. The boy's tears dried instantly, replaced with a wide grin as he hugged the scarf tightly. By the time dinner was served, Gideon was seated at a table surrounded by children, their chatter filling the air as they shared stories about their favorite Christmas traditions. Gideon found himself genuinely listening, laughing at their antics, and even sharing a few stories of his own. He recounted how, as a child, his mother had once burned the Christmas turkey so badly that the fire department showed up. The kids were in stitches, and for a moment, Gideon forgot about the world outside the community hall. Anya observed him quietly as she worked alongside other volunteers. She had expected Gideon to survive the evening by gritting his teeth and enduring the chaos, but instead, he seemed to be thriving. He wasn't just tolerating the kids, he was enjoying them. And they, in turn, seemed drawn to his awkward charm. When the dinner plates were cleared and the kids began gathering around the Christmas tree for story time, Anya took a seat next to Gideon. He looked relaxed, his shoulders no longer carrying their usual tension. "I have to admit," she said, breaking the comfortable silence, "you're better with kids than I thought you'd be." Gideon glanced at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "I wasn't sure I had it in me either," he confessed. "But I think I needed this. More than I realized." Anya nodded, studying him. "They like you," she said. "Even if your cookies are terrifying." Gideon chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not exactly a skill I've had much practice with." He paused, then added, "But tonight, it's different. I don't think I've felt this, grounded in years." Anya looked at him more closely. The usual sharpness in his expression had softened, replaced by something genuine. For the first time, she saw a man who wasn't defined by his wealth or his power, but by his ability to laugh at himself and care for others. Still, she reminded herself to remain cautious. A single night wasn't enough to erase years of arrogance and selfishness, but it was a start. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope for Gideon Merrow to become the man her father had once believed in. As the evening wound down, the children began gathering their coats and handmade crafts, their laughter still echoing through the hall. Gideon stood near the exit, shaking hands with parents and exchanging goodbyes with the kids who had dubbed him Christmas Cowboy. When the last family left, Anya walked over to him, her arms folded but her expression less guarded than usual. "You survived," she said, her tone light. "Barely," Gideon replied, though his smile suggested otherwise. Anya nodded, her gaze steady. "I'm impressed, Gideon. You didn't just show up, you actually tried. And the kids, they'll remember tonight." Gideon met her eyes, his voice quieter now. "Thank you for giving me the chance. I know I didn't deserve it, but I'm glad you pushed me to be here." Anya hesitated, then gave him a small smile. "Maybe there's more to you than I thought." Gideon raised an eyebrow. "Careful, Anya. That almost sounded like a compliment." "Don't get used to it," she teased, turning away to help the other volunteers clean up. As Gideon began gathering stray napkins and stacking chairs, he found himself reflecting on the night. He had walked into the community hall as a man doing what he thought was necessary to fix a mistake. But somewhere along the way, it had become more than that. He didn't feel like a businessman ticking off a task, he felt like someone who had finally stepped outside of himself, rediscovering a part of life he had long ignored. The next morning, Gideon found himself pacing outside the community center, the weight of his next conversation pressing heavily on him. Despite the progress he had made at the dinner, he knew it wasn't enough to undo the mistakes of the past. Anya deserved more than a one-night effort, she deserved a genuine commitment to change. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The center was quieter today, the hum of volunteers and light chatter replacing the cheerful chaos of the night before. Gideon spotted Anya across the room, arranging supplies for another event. Her focus was intense, her movements precise, as if she were blocking out the world around her. "Anya," Gideon said, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. She looked up, her expression neutral. "Gideon. What brings you here?" I wanted to talk, he said, stepping closer. Properly this time. Anya crossed her arms, leaning slightly against the table. All right, I'm listening. Gideon hesitated, then met her gaze directly. Last night, I realized something. For years, I've been so focused on achieving success that I stopped valuing the people who made it possible. I stopped looking beyond my own goals and seeing how my actions affected others, your father, your family, even you. Anya didn't respond immediately, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. Gideon pressed on. You were right to call me out. I can't change what happened, but I can take responsibility for it. And I can promise you that going forward, I'll be different. I'll do better. There was a long pause before Anya finally spoke. That's a nice speech, Gideon, but words alone don't fix anything. What happens the next time something doesn't go your way? Do you go back to being the same impossible to work for boss who nitpicks everything and dismisses people's ideas? Gideon winced but nodded. I don't have a perfect answer for that. But I do know this, I can't fix what's broken if I don't start somewhere. I want you to come back, not just because I need your help with the gala, but because I respect you. Your ideas, your determination, your ability to handle challenges, they're all things I need to learn from. Anya tilted her head, her expression softening slightly. And if I come back, what's going to change? Gideon smiled faintly. For starters, I'll try listening more and criticizing less. And if I slip up, Sabine will definitely make sure I hear about it. That earned a small laugh from Anya. She does have a way of keeping you in line. She's had years of practice, Gideon admitted. So, what do you say? Will you give me another chance to prove I'm not a complete lost cause? Anya sighed, a smile tugging at her lips despite herself. All right, Gideon. I'll come back. But only because I believe you're serious about changing, and because Sabine scares me just a little. Gideon laughed, extending a hand. Anya shook it firmly, a sense of cautious optimism passing between them. Back at the Merrow estate, preparations for the gala resumed in full swing. Anya dove back into the work, her presence bringing a newfound sense of order and creativity to the chaos. True to his word, Gideon made an effort to give her space to lead and implement her ideas. But old habits die hard. One afternoon, as Anya and a team of decorators worked on the grand ballroom, Gideon walked in and immediately began rearranging the placement of centerpieces without consulting anyone. Gideon, Sabine's voice rang out from the doorway, sharp and unmistakable. He froze mid-reach, turning to see his wife's stern glare. Yes, dear? What are you doing? She asked, her arms crossed. I thought the flowers looked better in a triangular formation, Gideon explained weakly. Sabine raised an eyebrow. And I suppose you asked Anya before making that decision? Gideon hesitated, then sighed. No. Put the flowers down, dear, Sabine said sweetly but firmly. Gideon complied, backing away from the table with a sheepish grin. Anya, who had been watching the exchange with amusement, gave him a knowing look. Old habits, Gideon said, holding up his hands in surrender. Let me handle this, Anya replied with a smirk. Despite occasional hiccups, the gala plans came together beautifully. Anya's ideas brought a fresh charm to the event, a mix of elegance and warmth that felt both sophisticated and inviting. She incorporated handmade touches, like local artisan ornaments on the Christmas tree and a dessert table featuring recipes submitted by the staff. Gideon, true to his promise, worked alongside Anya and the team, offering help without overstepping. At one point, he even joined the kitchen staff to taste test hors d'oeuvres, earning playful applause from the cooks when he approved a recipe without a single critique. Who are you, and what have you done with Gideon Merrow? Anya teased as he returned to the ballroom. Just a man trying to learn, Gideon replied with a grin. On the night of the gala, the estate was transformed into a winter wonderland. Twinkling lights adorned every surface, and the scent of fresh pine and cinnamon filled the air. Guests began to arrive, their laughter and conversation creating a lively, festive atmosphere. Anya stood near the entrance, watching as Gideon greeted each guest with a genuine warmth she hadn't seen before. He moved through the crowd with ease, stopping to share a laugh or a memory with old friends. "You've done an amazing job," Sabine said, stepping beside Anya. "He may never admit it, but Gideon couldn't have pulled this off without you." Anya smiled. "He's learning. Slowly, but he's learning. And thanks to you, he's enjoying himself," Sabine added. "It's been a long time since I've seen him this present." Anya nodded, her gaze following Gideon as he helped an elderly guest to her seat. "It's nice to see him like this," she said quietly. As the evening progressed, Gideon made his way to Anya, who was organizing the final touches on the dessert table. "Anya," he said, his tone sincere, "thank you. Not just for coming back, but for pushing me to be better. This gala wouldn't have happened without you." Anya looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You're welcome, Gideon. But let's be honest, you did a lot of the work too. And it wasn't just about the gala." Gideon smiled. "You're right. It wasn't. But I'm glad it brought us here." The day of the Christmas gala arrived, and Anya stood in the middle of the bustling ballroom, overseeing last-minute preparations. Every detail she had planned was coming together perfectly. The gold and ivory table setting sparkled under the chandelier's glow, the garlands were lush with fresh greenery, and the towering Christmas tree shimmered with handcrafted ornaments. She could see the guests arriving outside, their laughter floating through the air as they admired the estate's winter wonderland. Gideon approached her, looking composed in a dark suit and tie, a stark contrast to his usual brisk, businesslike demeanor. There was a warmth in his expression that Anya was beginning to recognize more often. "Everything looks amazing," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Anya gave a small smile, surveying the room. "I think we pulled it off." "You did more than that," Gideon replied. "And now it's time for you to enjoy the evening." She raised a brow. "Enjoy? Last I checked, I'm working." "Not tonight," Gideon said, his tone firm but kind. "I've invited your family to the gala as my guests. They should be arriving any moment." Anya blinked, caught off guard. "My family? But, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," Gideon interrupted gently. "Your father believed in me when I had nothing, and your family deserves to be part of this celebration. Not as employees. As honored guests." Anya opened her mouth to protest but stopped herself. There was no mistaking the sincerity in his voice. After a beat, she nodded. "Thank you, Gideon. It means a lot." When the doorbell rang, Anya was at the top of the staircase, watching as Gideon personally greeted her family. Her mother, dressed in a modest but elegant coat, clutched her purse nervously. Anya's younger siblings, wide-eyed with awe, clung to her mother's sides as they took in the grandeur of the mansion. "Mrs. Lorimer," Gideon said warmly, extending a hand. "Welcome to the gala. We're honored to have you here." "Thank you, Mr. Marrow," Anya's mother replied, her voice soft. "This is quite the home you have." Gideon smiled. "Please, call me Gideon. And tonight, this is your home too." The children giggled as he bent down to shake their hands, introducing himself with a playful seriousness that put them at ease. Anya's youngest brother, Stellan, pointed at the massive Christmas tree in the corner of the ballroom. "Is that tree real?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "It is," Gideon said with a nod. "But don't worry, it's not as heavy as it looks. Want to see the ornaments up close?" Stellan nodded enthusiastically, and Gideon led the family into the room, motioning for Sabine to join them. Anya descended the staircase, catching her mother's eye. They shared a quiet smile before Anya joined them near the tree. Sabine was already engaged in a conversation with her mother, her charm and kindness easing any lingering nerves. "Anya's been a lifesaver for us," Sabine was saying. "I don't know how we would have managed this gala without her." Anya's mother glanced at her daughter, her eyes glistening. "She's always been resourceful. Her father used to say she could solve any problem if she put her mind to it." Sabine smiled warmly. "Sounds like she takes after him." Anya felt a swell of gratitude as she listened to them. Sabine's sincerity seemed to bridge the gap between their two very different worlds, creating a moment of shared understanding. Meanwhile, Gideon had taken Stellan and Anya's teenage sister, Delia, to the dessert table, where they marveled at the spread of treats. Stellan's excitement was palpable as he pointed at a gingerbread house, his enthusiasm infectious. "Can we eat that?" he asked, his face lighting up. Gideon chuckled. "Not that one, it's for display. But we have plenty of cookies you can try. How about I help you pick some out?" As the evening progressed, Gideon introduced Anya's family to several of his high society guests, ensuring they felt welcomed and included. To Anya's surprise, her siblings seemed to adapt quickly, their natural curiosity charming even the most formal attendees. At one point, Anya caught her mother standing near the fireplace, staring at a framed photo of Everett Lorimer and a younger Gideon. "He kept this," her mother said softly when Anya approached. Anya nodded. "He told me it was to honor Dad's memory." Her mother smiled faintly. "It's nice to know he hasn't forgotten. Your father would have been proud of you tonight." Anya swallowed the lump in her throat and reached for her mother's hand, squeezing it gently. As the Christmas gala continued to sparkle with warmth and celebration, Gideon found himself pausing in the middle of the ballroom, taking in the scene around him. Guests mingled under twinkling lights, the air filled with laughter and the faint sound of carolers outside. The atmosphere was lively, yet it felt intimate, a blend of high society sophistication and the genuine, heartfelt energy that Anya had brought to every detail. For the first time in years, Gideon didn't feel like an outsider at his own event. He didn't feel the weight of proving himself or maintaining an image. Instead, he felt present, surrounded by people who weren't just there to network but to share in something meaningful. Spotting Anya near the fireplace, talking animatedly with a small group of guests, Gideon made his way over. Her presence had become a quiet anchor for the evening, drawing people together effortlessly. "Excuse me," Gideon said, gently interrupting. "May I steal Anya for a moment?" Anya raised an eyebrow, but she followed him to a quieter corner of the room. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone curious but not wary. "Better than okay," Gideon replied. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "Anya, I've been thinking a lot about what this gala, and everything leading up to it, has taught me. You've been the driving force behind all of this. Not just the event, but the way it's brought people together. The way it's reminded me of what really matters." Anya tilted her head, a small smile forming. "Gideon, are you about to get sentimental on me?" He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Maybe. What I'm trying to say is, I want you to stay. Not as an assistant, but as someone whose ideas, compassion, and drive have become an essential part of what I want this place to be." Anya's eyes widened slightly. "Are you offering me a permanent position?" "I am," Gideon said earnestly. "I want you to have the freedom to create, to lead, and to help shape the way we do things here. You've already shown me that I need more of your perspective in my life. So, what do you say?" Anya's heart swelled at his words, the sincerity in his voice unmistakable. For a moment, she thought of her father, of the legacy he had left behind and how this moment felt like honoring it in the best way possible. "I say yes," she replied, her smile lighting up her face. Gideon visibly relaxed, his grin widening. "Good. Because I don't know how I'd survive without you." As the evening wore on, Anya's siblings became the stars of an impromptu carol performance. Stellan and Delia stood near the grand piano, their voices rising sweetly above the murmurs of the crowd. Anya's mother sat nearby, her hands clasped as she watched her children with pride. When they finished their final song, the room erupted into applause. Gideon approached Stellan, who looked both thrilled and slightly embarrassed by the attention. "That was impressive," Gideon said, crouching slightly to meet Stellan's eye level. "You've got a real talent." "Thanks," Stellan said, beaming. "Do you sing?" Gideon hesitated. "Not well." Stellan grinned mischievously. "You should try. It's Christmas, you're supposed to do fun things." Anya, who had been watching the exchange, chimed in. "He has a point, Gideon. What's Christmas without a little singing?" Gideon sighed dramatically. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you." The children cheered as Gideon joined them at the piano, his deep baritone blending hesitantly with their bright voices. The room laughed and clapped along, the usually stoic Gideon Marrow endearing himself further with every slightly off-key note. Later, the party shifted into a lively Christmas trivia game, led by Sabine. Guests formed teams, their laughter filling the room as they debated obscure holiday facts and answered questions about festive traditions. Gideon surprised everyone by joining Anya's family's team, his competitive streak quickly coming to light. "Which country is credited with starting the tradition of Christmas trees?" Sabine asked, her tone playful but firm. Gideon leaned in, his voice low but urgent. "Germany. Trust me on this one." Stellan squinted at him. "Are you sure?" "Because I thought it was Norway." "I'm sure," Gideon said with mock gravitas. "I've got this one." Anya smirked. "All right, Germany it is." When Sabine announced the correct answer, Gideon grinned smugly. "Told you." Stellan rolled his eyes, but he couldn't hide his grin. "Okay, fine. You're pretty smart, for a grown-up." The team ended up winning the trivia game, earning a round of cheers and teasing remarks from the other guests. Gideon accepted the playful ribbing with good humor, his usual formality replaced by a genuine sense of camaraderie. As the night wound down, guests began to filter out, their goodbyes warm and heartfelt. Anya stood near the front door, thanking each person as they left. Gideon joined her, their easy banter continuing as the crowd thinned. When the last guest was gone, Anya's family gathered near the fireplace for a final toast. Gideon poured the sparkling cider, raising his glass as everyone settled into the cozy space. "To family," Gideon said, his voice steady and full of warmth. "And to the people who remind us of what's truly important." Anya's mother raised her glass, her eyes misty. "And to new beginnings." The glasses clinked, and for a moment, the room was filled with quiet contentment. By the end of the night, the Lorimer family prepared to leave, their faces glowing with happiness. "Thank you for everything," Anya's mother said to Gideon as they stood by the door. "You've made this a Christmas to remember." "It was my pleasure," Gideon replied sincerely. "Your family deserved to be here tonight." As the family walked out into the snowy night, Anya lingered behind, her gaze meeting Gideon's. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," she said. Gideon shook his head. "It wasn't trouble, Anya. It was what your family deserved, and what your father would have wanted." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Anya smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "Thank you," she said simply. Gideon returned her smile. "Good night, Anya." As the door closed behind her, Gideon stood for a moment, watching the snow fall softly outside. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace, a quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be.